everyone. Welcome to Lockdown Conversations. I am Phillip Williams. And on this episode, we'll be talking with a fellow villager of mine. You see, I was born in a beautiful village in the remote area of Guyana in Region 7. It's called Phillipai Village. And yeah, probably that's where I got my name from. And so I'm happy to be talking with a fellow villager, and we just chit-chatting about the lockdown situation and how it's affecting our little village. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Lockdown Conversation, Miss Laura George. Laura, how you doing?
Hi, Philip. I am good.
I am well too. Thanks for coming. So when last did you go to Phillipai? When was your last visit back home?
Sometime late last year. It was in relation to work, but every time I go up into my district, I try to make as much opportunity as I can as time permits. But yeah, sometime late last year.
Great.
I was in Jawala. I was in neighboring Jawala on work-related visit again in January. So yeah.
So for you, like, how do you communicate with your family or friends back home? And let's kind of put this in the light of what's happening now with the lockdown situation. Is Phillipai lockdown?
Communicating with my family back in Phillipai is very challenging because we do not have phone signal.
Yeah.
I think it's something that the villagers were divided on, and whether to get Digicel on or not. It was for their own very cultural reasons that I think, need to be respected as well. But more and more, I believe residents there are getting to understand that we need to have direct, real-time communication systems in the village. So, but I heard from my family this morning who called from a mountain somewhere between Phillipai and Chai.
Okay.
Because my mom has her farm there, so the entire family, which is my sister and her family, my brother and his family, are there with my mom at their farm, away from the main central village.
Yeah. And there's always a delicate balance between introducing technology and preserving culture. What is your take on that?
Well, what you're saying is very correct, and our villagers, as I said, have been divided with regards to how much do we allow our village or our young people especially to be open to the bigger world. And because I think largely we also understand that we may not be totally prepared to get into the world that opens up to both good and bad, So I think the elders were more like saying, no, not, it's not right, it's not good as yet, there's no right as yet. But as I said, more and more, we're beginning to understand that we need this communication system up and running in our villages to keep in touch with each other.
There's a perception that when people come from the interior and they come to Georgetown, it's almost like a shock. And then you said that we're not always ready for it. And then our reactions may be different. What have you noticed about that?
Perhaps you can ask me that question with a timeline.
Yeah.
Because, and I said that because of, what I experienced as a child coming to Georgetown. And now in 2020, what is it like?
Yeah.
Our general understanding has always been that Georgetown is this beautiful, bright, light-something place. But there are still other adults who say that, no, they don't like Georgetown. It's too noisy, it's hot. My mom likes to say, and the people are rude in Georgetown. So, And I think I have to give it to her. Yeah. It's always like mixed positions, mixed emotions in relation to our traveling to Georgetown and all of that.
Right.
I mean, we live in Georgetown, but we still will very much tell you that we like to have our cassava bread and our farina and our casserip and so on. I mean, even with the rice and flour bread there,
Yeah.
So that part, I think, is something that we always miss staying in Georgetown.
So let's talk about the COVID situation. What are you hearing from your family back home about this whole coronavirus, and how is information being filtered down back to them?
Well, there is some level of information going back to the villages, but I believe it is not going up in the way or the format and within the time frame that which it should go. So, for example, it took a while for the villages within the district, as the Upper Marginal District, to meet to say, look, here is some positions we'd like to take to safeguard our people. Particularly to Philippi, it would have been like the Tusha going back with some information from, the little that you gathered here out in Georgetown. Or the CDO, for example, reaching out through the radio sets, or the health personnel, so it's not coordinated, I would say. And so, for example, and as I said, not in real time. And why I say that is because, for example, the order that was passed in relation to the curfew or the lockdown and all of that.
Right.
I'm sure many residents in the Upper Maz and Philippi especially as well would not have seen a copy of that. And they would have not been consulted and, given space to say what might be possible, for them, and how might they like to see certain lockdown measures or what are essential services be considered essential by Indigenous peoples as well. What happened recently, for example, in Camarang was, the Alleluia Church, they're there.
Yeah.
And the Tusha who I spoke with says, he had discussions with groups, the church groups or whichever groups, to tell him about this order and all of that. The Alleluia Church felt that, they can still meet, maybe not in central Camarang, Warawata, but more in Koroba. It's Koroba below Camarang, down the river, Masrin River. And the church leaders ended up getting arrested by the police in Camarang.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And they spent an overnight on learning, even the Tusha since they were released the same evening. So I was trying to find, call around to see how I can get, for example, the Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs to intervene and all of that. But eventually they were warned and released. My thing is, perhaps even as the Tusha might have said they were informed, what does being informed really mean? So those are the kind of information that I know that the villages, so for example, in Philippi, the farthest village, the village in Upper Maz, I would say, would not have been able to get properly. So at the moment, well, since the lockdown and the schools closing and all of that, many residents, according to my mom, have gone into their farmlands. So if anybody were to go to central Philippi now, people are not there. They've gone to their farms. And for them at this time is the safest place to be, in the forests, in the farms, yeah.
That makes sense.
But, to understand exactly what's going on and where might be the hot spots and all of that, no, they don't have that information.
So is there any information that you have that you can use this platform to disseminate to people in remote areas? Because the network that we use here, we reach people in the Waiini River and, and a lot of remote villages. Is there any information that you have that you can give?
We usually work with district council bodies. And so through that medium, we've tried to pass information, what has been coming out from, the Ministry of Health and other relevant information from the World Health Organization. And there were some translations, very brief translations that were done, information translations that were done in various languages. We've tried to share those. At our own individual level, we have also tried to reach out to Tushaus and village leaders throughout Guyana as much as we can using internet and, depending on which Tushau or which community has also internet access. Right. So that has been also very limited. As staff, we're largely working from home and we have not been encouraging, pushing work that for leaders to travel from one village to the next. Taking note of the curfews or taking note of the order, taking note of the earlier warnings to restrict, to have on the social distancing and all of that.
Right.
So that's why we largely work from home now.
Do you know off the top of your head whether some villages have implemented a lockdown kind of system?
I don't know. I do know for the Upper Maz villages, as I said, they took a decision at a district level to have some form of lockdown measures. But and that was also trying to come up with trying to say which the airships and so should close. But there are some airships that are still open, and that they do not have like a total control of saying who should or who should not come. But I think we also understand that nationally there is a very strong push to have only cargo flights going in. So to some extent, that's good at trying to restrict the movement of persons in and out of Georgetown. The lockdown notice came at short notice, and even as our villages have their own farms, we can get their own cassava bread and so on. You also need, things like soap, basic stuff like soap, like salt. Right. Salt was $400 a pound, camera and all of those things. So in the long run, how might we be able to say for villages to be, really stand up to, and be resilient to the situation in the long term?
I know you continue to do your best over there. You advocate for the people in the interior and for our village. And let me know how I can help.
Perhaps we can have another conversation because this was too brief. There's so much that I think Indigenous people, our communities need to know, or that others need to know about our communities. Yeah, but thank you so much for also inviting me to speak.
Thank you, Kiluri.
And great job you're doing this. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye, Laura.